All right, everybody, welcome to another episode. And I think this episode might get a little spicy. I don't know. I'm just kind of in that mood. I'm in between clients right now. And if you've ever been a client of mine and you're listening to this, you will know that I always say my clients work in cycles. Like everyone's always on the same wavelength, it seems. And so, like, if you ever heard like how when women hang out together, their cycles sync up and everyone ends up, going through their period at the same time. My clients kind of seem to be on the same type of schedule because if one person's sick, everyone's sick. If one person needs to reschedule, everyone reschedules. And so there's always this consistent theme. And I wanted to talk about the theme that has been coming up both last week and this week for my clients, which is this element of letting go and no longer playing small. Okay. And if you haven't already listened to my episode with Megan Alton, it was the numerology forecast for 2025. Go and listen to that after this. She's so brilliant. She broke down the energies of 2025, the energies of each month in 2025, and what they hold, and how we can essentially use those energies to our advantage. However, 2025 is a 9 year. 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 5 equals 9. And nines represent endings and self leadership. And I don't usually feel a big change in energy from December to January, mainly because to me, like the new year really doesn't start till spring. However, this year it is very apparent how much the energies have already started to come into play in January within just a few weeks here. Like not only am I feeling it, all my clients are feeling it. Anyone I have a conversation with, like there's just so much shift happening, which is exciting, but also a little uncomfortable as well too. Because again, if we think about the energy of endings, you know, a lot of us have things we are ready to let go of, but with letting go comes an element of loss, some would say, right? And I think it's really important to talk about what this process looks like because I love using the idea of a hot air balloon when it comes to growth. And, we often think that we have to do more, we have to learn more, we have to be more when we're on the path of growth. And of course, there's an element of that. Like if you're learning to start a business, you're going to have to learn new skills, right? But oftentimes, the things that actually make the biggest shift in our trajectory of growth is what we need to let go of. So I always go to the hot air balloon example of like, so let's say you're getting into a hot air balloon, you're obviously on the ground right now, and they have weights in the basket, right? That's what's preventing you from flying up into the air. Now, of course, the idea of going into the air, into this hot air balloon sounds exciting, but you also have to think about the fact that you're floating in the air in the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. There's an element of risk technically there and an element of like, yeah, you just never know what could happen up there. So you wouldn't judge anyone for being a little nervous as to what going up in the hot air balloon could mean or what could happen, right? However, we choose to bank on the fact that something exciting could come of it. It's a new experience. We have no idea. And so we want to open ourselves up to the possibility. But in order to get that hot air balloon to rise, you have to remove the weight, right? And so it's not so much about we need to make the balloon bigger or we need to blow more hot air into it. It's as simple as we just need to let go of the weight. And as soon as we do that, we can rise, our energy can rise, right? And again, in my experience, when it comes to growth, that's usually the thing that affects us the most is what we need to let go of. And so, I've been witnessing a lot of my clients be hit head on with this letting go. Like they're being presented with opportunities right off the bat. Okay. And a lot of them are experiencing some really high highs, like manifesting some incredible things. Like I have one client who's had like, geez, at this point, it's probably like 5 incredible job offers thrown her way. I had another client who within like a week manifested her dream home in the middle of LA. Like not an easy place to manifest that. Another client who just manifested essentially like a $30,000 gift, like just wild things coming to the surface. And it's brilliant and exciting to see. The other side of that is they are also experiencing some loss and some lows and some shifting in relationships and people around them not quite knowing how to relate to this new version of themselves. And so I wrote this post on Instagram last week, and I wanted to go through that with you guys today and dive into it because I think it's really important to remember these things when we're on the path of growth. Because, of course, when we think about growth, we anticipate that it's going to be great because we know that how we've been living or how we've been operating is no longer serving us. So the idea of stepping into this newfound territory or becoming version 2.0 of ourselves is exciting, of course, because it brings a whole new set of possibilities and energies. But there is some inevitable things that are going to happen along the way that might deter you that I want to touch on now, because when these come up, it's easy to fall into the trap of what you think they represent when really they're just check marks on the path of growth. Okay? So, I had named this post 4 things to remember when letting go of limiting habits and behavior. Okay? So, number 1, your subconscious will fight you. Even if you are determined to release a habit or pattern that isn't serving you, your subconscious will bring up evidence of the past to deter you from doing it. The internal struggle is a sign you're breaking through, not a reason to give up. Okay, so I think this is the easiest thing that we can all identify with, right? Like whenever we're going through a period of growth or we're about to try something new and step out of our comfort zone, of course, there's that voice in our head that gets so freaking loud, right? And it does everything it can to find all the evidence from your past as to why this wouldn't work, right? Um, you know, say you're getting into a new relationship and you meet someone great and then you think about, oh, but this guy in the past did this and this guy didn't in the past did that and he kind of looks like him, and what if it's the same? And like that's natural, right? That's your nervous system and your subconscious playing, going into survival mode, right? What data do we have on similar situations like this that we can bring to the service to prevent us from getting hurt? Okay, or dying essentially is what our nervous system thinks. How can we keep her alive, right? And the way we keep her alive is by bringing all this evidence from the past to the surface. Now, first, we need to have compassion for the fact that we're wired for survival. Okay, so if you go back to our ancestors, to the point when they were living in nature and success equaled survival, like literally the success meant just like being able to survive in the wilderness, and that's all it took. Like that's where what we're technically on the deeper level still wired for. So I always say your nervous system does not care if you're happy, it does not care if you're healthy, it definitely doesn't care if you're growing. It only cares that you're living and breathing. And even if those are short shallow breaths riddled with anxiety, like it doesn't care. It goes, well, this is what we've done this long to keep her alive, so let's keep at it. How do we keep her in situations where we can keep her in that exact same state, because we know that this is what's kept her alive to this point, right? So now we're embarking on something new. We're applying for a new position. We're thinking about moving. We want to start a new career, whatever that is. And there's obviously the conscious part of us that is excited to try something new, but we are heavily programmed somatically, physically, intellectually, emotionally, with all this evidence from the past as to why we might not be able to do that. And when you're on the brink of trying something new, your ego, your subconscious is going to throw all that shit your way. Okay? Because again, it's just trying to keep you alive. It doesn't like the idea of the unknown. It doesn't like the idea of something new, right? So when you're growing or you're trying something new and all these things come to the surface, that's not an indication to stop. That's not an indication that this is a bad idea or that you need to run. This is actually an indication that you're growing, because if you weren't stepping into something new, all these fears wouldn't surface, right? Like they're only surfacing because you're testing the waters, right? Now, I will say some situations might not be the best choice for you. However, like you have to be able to have the discernment between, is this situation actually not healthy for me, Or is this just my fear trying to hold me back? And that's where you're going to have to step back and maybe get a little objective. You might have to write things on paper. You might have to talk it out with someone who has your growth at heart, like not someone who's going to potentially deter you from growth, or who's scared that if you grow, you're going to forget them and leave them behind. There's a lot of that. I'm going to get into that right away. But you need to have a conversation with someone who either has been in the shoes that you're trying to step into, who's walked the path that you're trying to walk, or someone who just genuinely wants to see you win. Okay? You got to get outside of your own head is essentially what I'm saying. Because our thoughts, we think we have a million thoughts in a day, and it is impossible to sort through them like in a strategic and objective manner. Okay. They're so fleeting. So when you have to discern between, is this actually a healthy step for me in my growth, or or is it just fear talking? Like you're going to have to you're going to have discernment on that. Okay. But 9 times out of 10, you already know what the right answer is, but it's your fear that surfaces, and it's that fear of failure. It's that fear of rejection that comes up, and that can honestly keep us dead in our tracks, for most of us. However, again, we have to take that fear coming up as a sign that you're actually pushing the boundaries. You're testing the waters. It shows we're heading in the right direction. If you never had any fear showing up on your path of growth, then I'd say you aren't growing. Like, you're not testing anything. You're not expanding your capacity. You're not pushing your limits if there's zero fear involved, right? And to go back to that point I just talked about with regards to the people around you, again, this has been a conversation that's been coming up a lot amongst my clients. Whenever you grow and whenever you're stepping into a new capacity of yourself, what that essentially means is that there's a version of you dying off. Okay. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. There has been an identity that you've lived with for so long, and that the people around you have also adapted to and gone into relation with. And when you start to shed these layers, the process goes, first, you're going to realize how you're shifting. You're going to see things that are out of alignment. And then soon these people are also going to start picking up on them too. And some people will be inspired and motivated by it and be like, dang, I want those things. I want to be like that. I want to let go of this stuff. And there's going to be a large group of people who deep down don't even realize they're doing it, but are projecting onto you the trigger that they're feeling from your growth. Meaning, when they see you choosing better, breaking the patterns, breaking the limiting beliefs, not playing small anymore, it's going to trigger within them where they're doing the same things, where they're holding themselves back, where they're moving from fear. And it's either going to, again, inspire them, or it's going to trigger them to find safety within your relationship by keeping you in that same place. So they might not say the most supportive things. They might tell you things are a bad idea. They might say, like, try and just project more fear on you. What if it goes wrong? What if you lose this? What if they leave? What if, and they won't even realize what they're doing by having these conversations with you. However, when that happens, again, it's not a sign that you have to run or you're making the wrong decision. You just have to have the awareness that you can step back and see what's actually happening and what's at play. Okay. So this is where you having a really strong relationship with yourself and being able to communicate with yourself in these moments in a level-headed space is really important. Being able to regulate your nervous system is really important, so that you can see beyond survival mode, so that you can see from a clear space as to what the bigger picture really is. Okay. So number 1, your subconscious will fight you. We're just going to expect the fight and know that means that we're growing. Number 2, your surroundings matter. If you're trying to quit drinking, don't hang out in a bar. Be mindful of what influences are around you, including people. Not everyone you love or that loves you will be able to breathe life into this new version of you. This period of growth can be very fragile, so treat it as such. Okay, well, I just pretty much just addressed this. But yeah, Community matters. Your relationships matter. And that's one thing I know I had to really face and be strategic about when I got back from traveling. So I left my previous career, which I'd been in for almost 9 years, in March of 2023, the end of March. And then 2 weeks later, I jumped on a plane and I went to Asia, and I spent 2 months over there in Bali and Thailand. And so it was good for me in the sense that I got to completely disconnect. And the time difference, so disconnect physically, but then even because of the time difference, like when I was up, my people were sleeping that were back home in Canada, and vice versa. So like I really had to be isolated and alone, which was good. But while I was over there, I had already been thinking about this before I went on my trip, but it really solidified the fact that I didn't want to play the same rat race game I was playing before. I was in a job for almost 9 years where I had golden handcuffs on. I was there strictly for the money, and it afforded me a great lifestyle, and I made incredible colleagues and had a really incredible career. Like honestly, I have no regrets. However, I knew that because I took this leap of faith to leave and have no plan, by the way, I didn't have a plan when I left. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew what I didn't want it. So that's why I left. Um, I had to make a pact with myself that once I came back home, that I was not going to go back to work strictly for a paycheck, because I had just given up myself for 9 years strictly for a paycheck. And that wasn't jiving with where I was in life anymore. And so when I got back, it's one thing to say that when you're on a beach every day in the middle of Asia, and no one, like North America is the only place in the world where we work this hard. Let's be honest, work the hours that we work. And like it's the rest of the world doesn't operate the way we do, and they're surviving just fine. So it's one thing to say I'm out of the rat race being over there. It's another thing to come back home, have no job, have no plan, and all your loved ones are still plugged into that same system. It was so tempting to not just find another job. Like, and honestly, it wasn't even find another job. What was happening is when I got home after, let's say, a week, all of a sudden these thoughts started to come up like, you need to find a job, you need to find a job, and for me specifically, I had set myself up financially to not be in that position. So I knew a year before I quit that I was going to leave. So I strategically said, I'm going to set aside this money so that when I come home, I don't need to be forced into that position. So I was fortunate that I set myself up that way. However, like, even though I knew I had money set aside for this exact period, the fear still crept in. You need to find a job. You need to get back to working. Like, you should feel guilty for being off. Everyone around you is still working. Like, just all these natural thoughts of the environment and the society that we're really accustomed to in North America came just crashing down on me, right? And now I didn't have the physical protection of being in another place. I was now back in the bar, as I just said, right? Like I was sitting in the bar trying to quit alcohol. And it's like, what am I going to do? And all my friends are working and my family's working and no one's available during the day. And so now I'm having to for the first time, entertain myself day after day with no plan, not knowing what I'm going to do. And also the other part of that is I didn't want to rush into what the next step was. Like I didn't want to be like, I have to figure it out now. Cause again, that felt forced. I just came from an industry where I felt like I was being forced every day. So it's like, no, I want this idea. I want this next chapter of my life to come to me from a place of inspiration, not a place of feeling desperate, right? So that was an adjustment in itself. But my point being is like everyone around me was like, I even had one girlfriend, I remember I had gotten back, and she's like, to be honest, and she said it really lovingly, like there's no beef, but she's like, I don't understand why you did anything you did this year. She's like, I don't understand why you quit your job. I don't understand why you like left and took off. And like she did, but she didn't, because from the outside looking in, like I had a really good setup. Like, there's lots of people that would have fought tooth and nail to be in the position that I was in with my previous career. And so she was just kind of like baffled, and she said it with love, but she was just being honest. Like, I don't get it, but like, cool. Like, I love you and support you no matter what. So my point in saying that is that when I got home, I had to be really careful with not feeding that those nattering fears that were underneath the surface. And I had to do that by monitoring my surroundings. So again, when I got home, Yeah, I was alone by choice because everyone is in the rat race. But then I also chose to stay isolated in that cocoon because, again, I knew it was a really fragile time. So then I ended up going traveling some more. Instead of listening to the fear of like, you need to make more money, I was like, I'm just going to use the money I have to keep honoring this time for me, you know? And again, that might not be what it looks like for you, but my point is that if you know you're in this place of growth and your relationships aren't meeting you on that same level and your work isn't meeting you on that same level, that doesn't mean you just have to give up and like end the relationship or quit your job right away. Like not every, I realize that's not just a simple answer that you can do, but I would say you need to be very strategic and very careful and intentional with how much time and energy you're giving said relationships and environments, right? If your growth is the most important thing, if you are letting go of these limiting behaviors and patterns that you've been carrying on for so long, and this is the year you're finally going to do it, 2025 is it. No more of this shit carrying it forward. We're letting it go. Then you need to really protect that goal and that intention and know that not everyone and not every place is meant to support that for you, because chances are a lot of these relationships and environments served the previous version of you, and there's a strong chance they're not going to serve this next version of you. And that's not no knock to anyone, you know what I mean? It's not like, there's obviously people in your life that are going to come with you along the way and they're going to be able to ride the different waves for you, but the ones that feel a little sticky, the ones that are not quite on board, yeah, you might have to let some of those go. And that doesn't even mean letting go of the relationship altogether, but that means letting go of the previous version of it, right? Your relationship might not have to end altogether, but the relationship that once was will have to. And I'm not married, but I've talked to married people who've been married for decades, and they say that like you can have a different relationship every 5 years. You're still married to the same person, but it's a different relationship, and that's kind of the nature of growth. As you go through different chapters, the person you're interacting with in whatever capacity, professional or personal, if the relationship's going to stand the test of time, then they're going to have to do some evolving too, right? And we can't control anybody else. So we never want to come from a place of making them have to do that. All we want to do is just focus on how we're coming more into alignment and trust that as long as we come into alignment internally, the external world will shift to match that. And that means relationships, environments, jobs, etc., either rising up with us or falling away. Okay. Number 3, you will do so good, then eventually crash again. This is inevitable. The universe loves to test all of us, so take your first fall from grace as a notch on the belt. If you can embrace your first trip up, instead of beat yourself up, you'll get up a lot faster. So I always joke around with my clients that I have these checkpoints along the journey when they're working with me. The first one is crying. Okay. So the first time they cry, that's a checkpoint. And another checkpoint is when they have a really rough week and then they come to me and they go, Minh-Thu, like, what the fuck? Like, I was doing so good. I was doing this. I was doing this. And this week, I feel like I just did a 180 on my head and like, what's happening? And, like all these things. And again, just like I said, that's a natural part of the process. The universe is going to test you to see if you're really built like that, to see if you really made the shift. It needs to know. It needs to know, because the universe doesn't need to be convinced of what's best for you. The universe needs to see that you're actually going to do it, because it responds to embodiment. The universe doesn't respond to words. It doesn't respond to hopes and dreams. The universe responds to embodiment. Is he carrying the frequency of what it would be to have said outcome come into place? You want to make $1 million? Do you have the capacity to really hold that within you? You want a healthy marriage? Do you have the capacity to really hold that within you? And it is going to test you and test you and test you to see what you're going to say no to and to see what you're going to say yes to. Okay. And so when you have this amazing growth and then all of a sudden you have a trip up, The faster you can embrace that trip up as a test versus beating yourself up and berating yourself, the more resilient and the quicker you'll get back up, the quicker you'll move past it. But if when that trip up happens, you feed into it, it is a slippery slope from there. Okay. It is so easy to get sucked into that further and further and further and go down the hill. Okay. So again, checkpoints on the path of growth. When the fall happens, know that you're falling up. You have the choice to fall into this next version of you, to fall into this new reality that you're creating by saying no to something, you know? But you have to remember that when it happens, don't sit there and beat you up, because that literally serves nothing. It eats up so much energy. It's a waste of time. You feel crappy about yourself. Like, what does it solve to sit there and shame yourself so heavily? And that doesn't mean you don't take accountability. It doesn't mean you don't step back and have awareness of the situation and what happened and what your role was in it. Of course, we still have to do those things, but don't shame yourself. And I think that's the fine line. So many of us do that. We shame ourselves thinking, you knew better. How could you let this happen? Why did you say that? And we ruminate and we ruminate. And like, shame is such an easy cycle to get stuck in. It's such an easy trap. And it's so unsupportive to growth. It's incredibly limiting, and it's like kryptonite to growth. Okay. So again, you're going to trip up. It's going to happen. And like, I saw this quote on LinkedIn, and they were talking about how the most successful people in the world, the people who've created incredible things for themselves, experience all the same fears, guilt, hiccups, problems, etc., as everyone else. But the difference is they know that's a normal part of the path, and therefore it doesn't hinder them. Right. So they feel all the fears, they have the insecurities, they have the same mistakes, they still trip up, they say the wrong thing, still have all the things that the rest of us do, but they know that that's like a natural part of the process, and therefore it keeps them going. They know it's actually a little check mark on the road. Instead of looking just for check marks that are positive, you have to look for check marks that are maybe not as obvious, but at least show that you're growing, right? So expect the fall, expect the getting bumped on the head, expect the questioning if you're doing the right thing and how did you lose track. Expect that. Because again, at least if you can have that reflection, it shows that you're viewing it from a different vantage point than you once were. If you hadn't done any growth, you wouldn't have been able to see the difference. But the fact that you're able to identify the growth that you had and then this fallback shows that you're standing from a new viewpoint, and that's what's most important. Okay. Number 4, the wrap up of it all. Repetition is key. Everything feels uncomfortable till it doesn't. When you repeat something over and over, you create a new imprint on your nervous system. The more familiar this becomes, the less resistance you'll feel. Even small doses of the same behavior are highly effective. Okay, I think we all know this. It's habit, right? It's creating a habit. Everything feels uncomfortable in the beginning, right? Every successful person, every expert in any field had to start as a beginner. But the point is that they just started and they kept going, and no matter how many times they hit their head, they just kept putting one foot in front of the other, right? And the more you do that, A, the less that bump on the head hurts, and B, eventually the less you'll just bump your head altogether. Right? Like we've all been there at some point in some way, shape, or form in different facets in our life. We've all had to start there. And so don't forget that either. I think the tricky thing is like, once you have accomplished some things in life, right? And you're, whatever, you have a big title, a big role, you have a big family, you're just a leader of some type. Like, once you've had some success, we kind of forget what it's like to feel like a beginner again. And you get addicted to wanting to do things that you're good at, right? And that's probably every human, but especially once you've gotten a taste of like, kind of being that guy or that girl in whatever field, like you've kind of had a little bit of that taste of what it's been like to be the go-to. And then when you have to start all over again or try something new, like naturally you want to do things that you're good at because that's your comfort zone, and that's validating that sense of self-worth and that sense of like being good enough, right? Um, but that's not the reality of growth, but sometimes we're biased towards that. I just have been thinking about so I'm my boyfriend, is a big skier, and I haven't skied since I was 13, mainly because A, the boots hurt my feet, but B, I was a dancer all my life. I was a competitive dancer. And my mom said to me one day, she's like, if you hurt yourself on that hill, I don't get any of my money back for your dance lessons. She's like, so I can't, she like didn't forbid me, but she threatened me very strongly, saying that like, if you bust your leg and all these lessons go to waste, like I'm not going to be happy. So I just never went as a kid. And so, I obviously live in Edmonton and Alberta, where skiing and like winter sports is a major thing, but I just haven't done it. And then now as an adult, as like 36-year-old old, also I'm a recovering dancer. So like, we just know what it's like to have thrown your body into weird positions, and then we're kind of paying for it now. I have aches, bumps, and bruises in places you'd never imagine. So the thought of getting on a ski hill to me sounds like death. Okay. And he's so sweet, and he wants to take me and he wants to teach me and all these things. And instantly I was like, that's never going to happen. Like I shut it down so quick. And he just kind of looked at me, and I even just caught myself just being so like I just shut it down so quick. And Ivan was like, damn, like I didn't even like, it's skiing. Like he's not asking me to jump out of a plane. It's skiing. Like 5-year-old kids ski very well. And he's also a ski instructor. So if anyone can get me to ski, it's gonna be him. But like I just after I was like, wow, I was so quick to shut that down. And I realized it's because I knew I wouldn't be good at it right away. Right. And I've been, you know, quote unquote good at a lot of things for a long time. Like, I'm obviously I've had to start a lot of new things, and it's been uncomfortable, but I can usually get my feet wet pretty quick. But it was just eye-opening to me how quick I said no. And then obviously now I'm rethinking it. And obviously now that I've said this on here, I'm probably gonna have to go with him. However, like I've always said I never want fear to hold me back. Like to me, that is the biggest regret I ever had, is when I don't do something purely out of fear. Like when I think back on decisions I've made, and it rarely happens anymore, honestly. Like I'm pretty good now at feeling the fear and choosing to move forward anyways. But like I don't want that ever to be the reason I don't succeed. I don't want that ever to be the reason I keep playing small, is because I'm scared. Now that doesn't mean every time I can just rip off my shirt and I'm Superman, and it's like it's still a process. It might take me a couple extra days or a couple extra weeks to step into it. But like when I know something is for my highest good and is going to support my growth, I I choose to move forward anyways, because I know that if I do it and I keep doing it, eventually I won't be scared to do it anymore. And that's what I say when repetition is key, right? Even in the smallest capacity, like a common example and something I talk with my clients a lot about with is like social media. Social media, it's a jungle out there. I think we all know that. But it's this aspect of being seen. And, I have a few clients who are expanding their businesses, and we've talked about social media presence and what that's like. And, social media is a prime example of where you overthink everything. And I'm speaking from experience. I've been there, and I'm sure I do it to an extent still. But like when you're putting yourself out there, we get so hyper focused on how we're going to be perceived, and it has to look a certain way, and the content's got to be this, and it's got to be shot professionally. And like I used to think all these things too. Like when I first launched this business, I hired a videographer, I hired a photographer, and he did great work. But then I also realized that me doing that was just adding a barrier to me being fully seen and me being fully stepping into my purpose on multiple aspects. Right. And so then eventually I got to a point, I'm like, this doesn't need to look perfect. It doesn't need to look a certain way. It just needs to get a message across. And more importantly, it just needs to signal to the universe that I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to make this happen and to make it work, that not all the pieces need to fall into place for me to step into this purpose. And again, if I go back to the people who I know who've created incredible businesses, who've left major impact on the world, they were never afraid to get started. In fact, they expect to mess up. Like they expect to go out in the world and to not have it right the first time, but they go out and do it anyways to get feedback on what's wrong, so they can come back, they can adapt, and then they can switch it and they can shift, right? Like it's that process that builds tenacity, that builds grit, that puts you in a position to win, is because it's not about focusing on what the outcome's going to be and how many likes you're going to get and how many people are going to share. Like none of that matters, because A, you can't control any of it, but B, it's the energy that you're sending out into the universe is, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this happen. And so if we're referring back to, again, letting go and leaving limiting beliefs and patterns behind, repetition is key. So the more you can say no, the better, right? The more you can cut things off and not dwell in the energy, the better. And that can happen in simple ways. That might be you cutting off a part of a conversation because it's not serving you anymore, and then continuing to just still have a dialogue about something else. That can be you turning down job offers that aren't serving you. That can be you choosing to, instead of overcommit yourself to another project or something at work, saying no. Like what you say no to is just as important as what you say yes to. And so when it comes to letting go, that's typically the angle we're at. We're letting go of the people pleasing. We're letting go of the perfectionism. We're letting go of the guilt running our life. Like we're letting go, and we're saying no, and we're setting firm boundaries. Okay. Now, the other thing is that when you're going through this phase and you're letting go of said things, and now you're in this period of letting things go, and so it's like endings and beginnings happening simultaneously, right? And I think we have to remember that as well too. When things end, we obviously usually focus on how sad, quote unquote, the ending is. Oh, something was in my eye. Sorry. When things end, we focus about how, sorry guys, what is going on with my eye? There you go. Back in business. I can see again. Okay. When endings come up, we often get caught up in the sadness of it or the fear about the fact that things are changing. But remember, endings and beginnings go hand in hand, right? One can't exist without the other. So if you're in a season of letting go right now, if you are embracing and stepping into 2025 energy, that means you're probably experiencing a lot of polarity right now. Again, my clients all are. So they're having these huge wins, these amazing things come through because they're finally because they're letting go of so much stuff, they're creating space for more things to come in. Right? We see how that works. When you let go, when you let go of all the energy that you've been wasting with the guilt, the fear, the shame, all that stuff, you create space within your field to welcome in new opportunity, new abundance, new energy, okay? And I'm seeing it happen with them. They're letting go of all these things, right? But by doing so, they're also welcoming in so many new opportunities. And the challenge has been for them is like, well, how do I navigate that? Because that can be really emotionally draining, going from the highs of the highs to the lows of the lows. But the key is to stay balanced and regulated through all of it. Okay. And this is why I say, if working with your nervous system is not a part of your success strategy, you're not even touching the surface as to what you're capable of. And I will put that on everything I love. I'll swear that on my mama's head, who I love more than anything in this world. If you are not using your nervous system as part of your success strategy, you are not even scraping the surface of what your productivity, your potential, your profit is. Okay. I will take that to the grave. Okay. So the key is when you're in this new period now of stepping into version 2.0 of you, and you have these highs and lows, the key is to ride it out and be regulated and balanced through it all. That means a sustainable way of handling this new path. Okay. If you're not grounded while this stuff is happening, you're going to burn yourself out again. And honestly, you're probably not even going to be able to experience the highs and lows because your nervous system's not going to have the capacity. But if you're not doing it in a way that's sustainable, you are going to be burnt out again. And all this growth you're going through isn't going to be sustainable. It's going to crumble. It's going to crash because you're going to crumble and crash. Okay. So this means coming back to self. This means tuning into that inner child voice that says, I need a break. I need some sleep. I need some nutrition. I need to play. I need a hug. It means tapping into that version of you and coming back to yourself so that no matter what happens, you always have a North Star. You always know you always know what's most important in bringing you back into alignment. Because that's the point of all of this, right? The point of the shedding, the point of the releasing, the point of the growing is to come further into alignment so that you can live a life that feels peaceful and purposeful and free, right? We've all done the other. We've done the anxiety, we've done the overwhelm, we've done the people pleasing, the ruminating in the thoughts, the not letting go of the past, the playing it small. No more playing it small. Okay? This is it. It's 2025. No more playing it small. Like for what? For what? So your fear can keep governing you and keep running the show? Like we all have fear and it's all in our heads. It's all in our heads, okay? And I love the quote, fear and faith both require you to believe in something you can't see. So what are you going to choose? Okay? What are you going to choose? We know what fear gets us. We know the pattern that keeps us in. We most of us have been living in that space for so long. We've already felt the outcomes of it, right? But don't choose to keep doing that. There are so many tools, there's so much information. And quite frankly, with what's out on the internet right now, there's no excuse to keep sitting in that space, honestly. And if you don't know how to actually put it into play, reach out to a coach, shameless plug. But like there's way too much information out there right now for you not to be able to like take your life into your hands, to take your power back and live the life that you truly want to live. But here's the thing, a small percentage of you are actually going to do that. Okay. You're going to hear all this, you're going to get all the information, and you're just going to fall into your old patterns. And why is that? Because 95% of our actions that we have during the day, our behaviors and actions, are subconscious programming, meaning what we've been wired with since since we've been children. And that 5% that's conscious, the 5% that wants to change, the 5% that wants to create a new habit, step into a new role, have a healthy relationship that wants that, it's only 5%. So we need to put into place practices, tools to help shift what's currently in the 5% over to the 95% box. So now that 95% isn't so limiting and it can expand what it does for you. This is why the repetition is key. But there's no more excuses, guys. We can't keep playing small. So whether it's a career change, a new relationship, or leaving a relationship, maybe it's moving, maybe it's just choosing inner peace, whatever that is. No more playing small. And if you are, guess who's the only person that's responsible for that? It's you. It's not the circumstances. It's not your boss. It's not your spouse. It's not the city you live in. It's none of that. The only person that can get in the way of any of that is you. So that's my soapbox for today. Went on a little bit longer than I thought I would. However, I hope that's helpful. And for the record, guys, I am always open to having conversations about this. So whether you DM me on LinkedIn or Instagram, like please reach out. But I just want to see everybody win. And I say that with the most genuine love in my heart. When I see a client come to a session and they have a breakthrough, it is the most fulfilling thing to experience ever. And so I just want to see you win. And it's possible. It's possible. I've seen it in myself. I've seen it in so many people I've worked with. And that's why, again, surrounding yourself with people that are motivated, that want to grow, that are going after greatness, that don't want to be held back by their fears and blind spots. Surrounding yourself with that is so important. And by the way, I have a whole community of people that do that in the Higher Alignment program. Some real badass, dope people who are doing some incredible things in the world. So if you're curious, come on over. But whatever you guys choose, just no more playing small. This is the year. Play big, because the universe is going to keep sending you lessons and challenges until you figure out how to do it.